All right, I'm here with Peter Walker, the Senior Director of Insights at Carta. Carta is, I think it's fair to say, the leading cap table management software now. I think I checked you guys raised a Series G last for $500 million. So, and you have 137,000 followers on LinkedIn, putting out some of the most interesting, insightful content on LinkedIn. So I'm very excited to jump into both the insight functions type of things, how to build it out, who should build it out, what are some key lessons there, and then also more kind of one level down, your LinkedIn journey, what you've learned about posting, creating engaging content, all of that good stuff. But Peter, thank you for joining.
Finn, thanks for so much for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Cool. How did this whole thing, like, first of all, like, is it you to me are kind of like the OG of this insights motion function. I mean, there's now a couple other people that I see on LinkedIn. I think there's Jesse of CB Insights. I've also recently seen there's a YC company, Weave, that does these like does this come from somewhere? Did you get inspired by someone? Like what's history
I
of
think that, well, it's kind of you. I do think that we were one of the first, if not the first, to do insights in exactly this way. But it definitely is sort of an evolution of emotion that's been around for a while. I think that the true OGs in this sense would be Gong and some other sort of content, marketers at those places, Devin Reed being one of them, who would kind of encapsulate, data from the market that they were seeing or had access to basically every quarter or so. And they would just kind of give it back in these big reports. And, those old Gong reports were things like, is swearing in a sales call makes it 2 times more likely that X would happen or whatever. They're a little playful, a little fun, but they were definitely good for salespeople. I think the way that we've done it at Carta, which I started this function at Carta about 4 years ago, the big shift that we've done, I guess there's 2 shifts, which is one, we do it much, much more often. So we are putting out content effectively every day at this point, sometimes literally 7 times a week, at other times between 4 and 5 times a week. But almost every day, you're going to find something new on my LinkedIn about the startups in the world that they swim in. And then the second thing is that we've sort of expanded it beyond just quarterly reports. So it's social graphics, it's reports, it's decks, it's YouTube videos, it's speaking events. It's just kind of like an all-encompassing content motion where the engine of that content is just the data itself. So that, I think, has been the biggest, evolution that we've brought to the space.
Is your LinkedIn profile the main distribution channel for this? I mean, I know that, you're also on other people's podcasts. I checked out your Twitter X, you also post there, but it seems like it gets less reach overall. Like, or like, is your profile the main distribution channel?
I would say that my profile is the first distribution channel. So it's where a lot of stuff starts on LinkedIn. And to be clear, that wasn't actually my goal coming into the company. This like sort of public part of the job was sort of just grew naturally out of me starting to post things and then like finding that the way that the algo works, this is a real hit. So that has made my LinkedIn sort of this primary channel for a lot of it, but it's only the first channel. And then it spreads to other things. And the things that are like the most valuable on the company side is, can we take someone who is interested in this kind of data and having a lot of value brought to them by the 0-click content they find on LinkedIn? Can we transfer that into a data subscriber? And so we have a newsletter that goes out every week with extra data and with more specialized stuff that goes to close to 40,000 people now. Then we have events.
And is that VCs who sign up or founders or?
I'd say the audience is like 30% founders, 30 to 40% VCs, and then the rest is like startup, anyone who's interested in startups kind of broadly. Then you've got virtual events, which are a huge driver of traffic and value for us. So I'll host LinkedIn Lives, I'll host webinars, I'll host whatever for the company. And that will be, we'll grab 800 to 1,000 people every time who want to learn more about a specific part of the data set that we're talking about. So like those two mechanisms are fantastic if what you're in the trying to build is a great email list that's like interested people that are relevant to your ICP. And then
Yep.
the last channel is just kind of other people's stuff. So other podcasts, speaking
Yep.
events, other
Yep.
people's
Yep.
events.
Yep. So is it correct to assume that there's almost like your LinkedIn is kind of the testing ground where you post close to every day, and then when one of your posts does really well, that's when you kind of use that as signal to make that a virtual event or add more nuance and depth to it and turn that into the newsletter that goes out to the list?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it. There's another way to think about it, which is that the core, like I just think that the biggest shift in content over the last 5 or 6 years is just the always on nature of it. So like if you look at what's working on X right now, which is a platform that I don't do very well on, but I think is instructive on like where social is going oftentimes, like TBPN, the Technology Brothers podcast, that's effectively just CNBC for tech live on X every day. And they're just churning out content so much. That I think is the model. I mean, is the
Mm,
more that you can be in the conversation, the better. And that if you're doing stuff once a week or even once a month, it's just not nearly enough.
right.
So like, how can you build a system? And this is where my LinkedIn comes into this. How can you build a system where you can be present with new content every day? That's effectively what Insights gives companies, is the ability to have steady streams of new information all the time. And that is really valuable because you can only talk about your own product or sales stuff so often before people tune you out and they get really bored and annoyed.
Yeah. Has a certain piece of data or insight ever informed any broader Carta strategy? I know, for example, that lots of founders who post about kind of thought leadership, they might change website messaging based on a post doing really well, and this clearly
Totally.
resonates. So
Yep.
do you have any examples around those?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I probably spend 50% of my time like externally evangelizing for Carta data, another 30% internally, like building a ton of stuff. And then the last 20% I spend with our product teams. And that's
Mm,
for like really significant customer feedback that we get from the data itself about, oh, we should have. So, a great example, when we built our launch product, which is free cap table until you hit $1 million, we didn't have anything in there around the market and the like kinds of ways that people were fundraising, et cetera. So now if you go into launch, there's a whole massive tab in that product that is just market insights, what other founders are doing
mm,
just like you right now, how you should, like, what are the median valuation caps for a company like yours raising on a safe today in your region of the US. It's all very like up to the moment. And that comes from people saying, hey, this is a cool product. Thank you for effectively giving me free cap table, but I don't know what to do with it. Right.
yeah.
I know I'm going out to fundraise, but I don't know anything about the market. So like putting these insights, actually embedding them into the product has been really cool.
Who should build an insight function? I mean, it looks like it's kind of like they have a large proprietary data set, but I'm sure there's more to it. So,
Not a lot more to it, to be honest. You can build, I'd say like there's two kinds of companies that should build an insights team. One is a more established company that has a large proprietary data set that, and this is the key point, that the company is willing to use in service of brand. So the big question when you have a large proprietary data set is,
mm,
are we going to monetize this data? I think it's actually mostly a silly question. I think data is actually much harder to monetize than people think, at least in terms of direct monetization. You know, you pay me some money and I'll give you a PDF full of information. That actually isn't a great business model. Um, and many companies who are trying to figure out what to do with their data would do better putting it out in aggregated and anonymized ways to build their brand. I firmly believe that. So that's the first kind of company. The second kind is the scrappy startup that is building a data set and wants to use nuggets from that data set in interesting ways to help like become a source of truth.
mm-hmm.
Um, that is, and people ask me, I probably helped a dozen companies or so think about starting insights teams now. And they say like, how much data is enough? How do I
Yeah.
know that I have enough data that this is a useful motion for me? And I would say that question doesn't matter at all. There's no concept of statistical significance when it comes to marketing.
Mm-hmm.
What you have to be is honest about the data that you have and what you're working with, and then you can allow people to draw their own conclusions. I mean, the number of marketing reports that exist online today where you scratch down to the methodology and it's like 180
Yeah.
survey responses from random, like, your data is probably better than that, right? So the move is be honest, put the data in the graphic and say, hey, this was driven from 400 SaaS companies doing X, and then just state your conclusions and like see what the market tells you. There's no need to gate yourself by some sort of like, oh, I don't have enough data right now. Like, try it and see if it works for you. Then you get to the second part of the question, which is who can do this, as in what kind of person do you need
Yeah.
in-house? Basically, you're looking for 3 skills. The first is data analysis, so SQL, and then a visualization tool of some kind so they can make good looking charts and graphs. AI is, by the way, making this much easier. Not quite perfect yet, but I think over the next year or so, you'll have really, really, really fantastic chart makers for non-technical people. So that's one. And then 2, that person also needs to be able to talk about data and be a storyteller. And so are you going to train a data scientist to be a talker and a marketer? Or are you going to train a marketer to be a data scientist?
I think you have a marketing and growth background, right? So you are
I do.
the storyteller who learned data.
I think, yes, at heart, I was definitely a marketer first. And then but I spent time running data and analytics teams at smaller startups. So I was, I write pretty good SQL, that kind of stuff now. Um, I just think that it's like, if you can find someone in your company who can build good looking charts and is absolutely fascinated by your industry, that's the person that should run your insights team. The curiosity really matters here, because if you're going to wake up every day and make something new from the data set, you have to actually care about what your company is doing and like what the data means to people. And because I was already startup fanatic, it made a lot of sense.
When is the data interesting enough? Like I'm thinking through right now, we're working with a bunch of different SaaS companies, and
Yep.
it's like, okay, one of them, it's an IP management software. And so they help R&D managers and IP patent attorneys manage
Mm,
their patents. I mean, they have some data, I'm sure, around who uses it, how many patents they process, like how often they run into a patent conflict,
yep.
like usage data, right? Not market data, just like
Yep.
literally how are their customers using it. We have
Yep.
another customer that has they sell to lawyers, and it's like a contract review software.
Mm,
So probably they have some data around like, here's how many contracts companies review, and here's the types of contracts they review. Like, is it
yep.
is it a sales agreement, or is it a whatever? Like,
Yep.
I almost feel like every SaaS company has at least usage data around how their customers are using whatever they build, which is some amount of proprietary data. I'm
Yep.
assuming not all of these should build insight functions. So
No,
like,
not all of them should build insights functions, but more of them than you think should. And really, it just comes down to what's the right level of effort and attention that you should be spending here. So Carta is in some ways a bad example, or a unique one, in that our data set is, one, incredibly dense, but then 2, like, part of a very active online conversation around startups. So
yeah.
startups love talking about themselves. We love talking, venture capitalists in particular love talking about themselves. Like, VC is this very buzzy industry with a ton of ins and outs, and our data can talk to like basically all of it. So we're kind of uniquely placed for this motion. Another company that just set up an insights team who I really love is Ramp. They
Mm-hmm.
have finance data, and credit cards, et cetera, for 30, 40,000 of the highest flying technology companies. That's an amazing data set. Let's take that contract company for a second here. The distinction I would make is, if all you have is usage data, you
Mm-hmm.
know, this many people logged in, they checked this kind of contract, et cetera, you could maybe make a piece or two out of that. And I wouldn't say that you have enough to build an evergreen motion.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's an annual thing where you just kind of wrap up and you say, hey, maybe it's just for clients. Maybe it's like a Spotify Wrapped, but just for people that are on this platform, and saying, here's how you acted on the platform this year here's what ways that other people did. Could be fun, but it's not going to be like a distinct
daily
motion.
new
Yeah,
chart. Yeah.
it's not going to be a growth kind of thing. The flip would be if instead within that contract database, you have the ability to understand the work that's being done at a granular level, then I think that's really interesting. So you could say things like this. You could be like, startups review these kind of contracts, and in those contracts, these 3 clauses are always the most contentious, like ownership, blah, 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 blah. Like I know we do contract analysis at Carta, and that's part of the data set that we have, deal terms for
Yeah.
VC contracts. That's really interesting. That is something that I would pay for or think about, stopping on the scroll and reading. If you could tell me, companies like mine typically run into the most legal problems with these 3 things, like that's great. So it's just a question of like, how can you find your way into the data? And then, and the last point, and maybe this is the cultural point, is your company, like, is everyone aligned at your company that you want to put this data out into the world? It's not every company that will be aligned to that. It's not every legal team that will be aligned to that. You need to deeply understand what you can and cannot do, what your customer privacy is. At Carta, we always aggregate and anonymize things. So we will never, ever talk about individual companies or name them at all. It's always aggregate market statistics. You need to understand what your restrictions are, because you definitely don't want to mess around with people's data.
Is there, this is a super naive question. Is there some process around ramp? Let's say they want to publish data around, hey, this is how much an average company spends per month.
Yeah.
And they spend it on marketing versus sales versus this. And do they need to get written permission from customers, or is it just kind of like, as long as you anonymize it, it's okay? Or
that's a great question. On the ramp side, I don't actually know. I know for the Carta side, it is a line in every single one of our customer contracts. So in the standard service agreement, there's a line about we can use this data for aggregated and anonymized analysis. However, companies can always opt out of that if they want. So, and we've had a couple. We have 45,000 clients. I think less than 10 have opted out. So it doesn't really affect the data set very much. And of course, like if you don't want
you know them by name.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't want your data included, it's totally fine. But like, again, the value, this is another reason I love insights as this like motion, is that I'm not selling you anything. I'm just telling you about the world, right? And there is such a beauty in being able to go to people and saying, no, I'm not trying to sell you Carta right now. Like, I hope you love Carta by the time we're done talking, but my goal is to give you something about the world you're living in that is useful to you. And I'll do that based on this data set. That's the only reason I exist at Carta. And that is like so I don't have a lead gen goal. I'm not held to sales. I don't care about any of that. I just want to help founders and VCs make better decisions. And having someone in your company whose orientation is only to broaden like the love for your company out there in the ecosystem, it's actually really valuable. I'm in this market, especially when it is so difficult to get attention, the noise is so high, and everyone seems to be like peddling crap oftentimes with their messaging or the way that they do sales outreach. Like, having a part of your company that is dedicated to not doing that, just providing value, is super useful.
Do you report to the CMO?
I do, yes. I sit in marketing.
And so, like, how do you consider this brand, or how do you actually get to the mindset that, because I mean, the typical question is, show me the ROI of this activity. And how would you suggest companies think about this, measure it, not measure it at all, maybe, and just trust the process? I don't know. Like, what's your...
I think it's difficult to tell company executives not to measure anything.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would go in with that message necessarily. But I would maybe tweak it a little bit. And so what do we track as like performance metrics? We track all sorts of things, all the standard stuff that you're thinking: impressions, followers, data subscribers, newsletter attendees, or webinar attendees, blah, 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 blah. There's 1,000 things. If I were to say, what is the easiest way to do this as a company? I would say you need two things. First, you need to commit to it for 6 months. It does
Mm-hmm.
not happen overnight. You have to do this for a while. And there will be a period in which you're producing content and you're probably shouting into the void and nobody's listening that much. That happened to me. It happens to most people. It's just inevitable. Like, as you're getting started, not very many people will read your stuff. That's sort of the default. As you get bigger, you'll start to gain an audience, hopefully. And then that audience, again, a beauty here is that audience will feed you the next thing they want. They're asking questions in the comments, and those questions become the next graphic, become the next analysis. So that's very helpful. When you're measuring it, you could measure 1,000 things, but the easiest way to do it is just put the survey at the end of a demo request and say, how'd you hear about us? And add the insights, or whoever is going to do your insights at your company, as a channel. We did that for a while at Carta. We no longer need to because it worked really well. So then but again, in some ways, the measurement of this thing is useful, but has to be downstream of the conversation up front with executives that they are good with this idea generally.
Yeah.
Because that like cultural buy-in is very important. And that gets to a second sort of hidden question, which is who in the company should do this. If you're a small SaaS startup, like, it should be the founder, probably. They might not write all the content or do the pulling, but they should be probably the face of it. If it's a motion that makes sense for them and you can fit the writing in their voice, etc.
That's Weave, what Weave is doing, for example.
Yes, exactly. Adam at Weave is a great example of that. And again, the value there is that who are you trying to make a thought leader? Like, having a founder as a thought leader in the space that you want is fantastic. And it doesn't need to be 100,000 followers. It can be 5. It can be 4,000 followers if they're the right 4,000 people in your industry that are really, really hyper interested in this kind of stuff. That's awesome. That's like so valuable to you.
Yeah.
So that's most of the value will accrue. A lot of the value will accrue to that person. So picking who that person is does matter. At a bigger company, it's really hard to make this the founder if they've got a billion things going on. So maybe it makes sense to have another person in your company. To be honest, I think this is just the start of a wave, insights or not, of people sort of building more public brands within companies, and sort of like a talent strategy that's housed in individual people at B2B companies. Just the way that we buy and live on social these days, I think it's inevitable that that's going to happen. So this is a good starting point.
Which company that doesn't have an insight function right now is most missing out by not having it?
The one that comes to mind immediately is Stripe. They've got to have an absolute treasure trove of stuff that people would want to know. Honestly, like, economists would want to know it to like better judge the American economy or global trade. Like, there's so much there. I also think that Flexport, which is the shipping SaaS company, would be an amazing insights place to work. There's probably, I don't know, a dozen or so other ones that I'm pretty interested in. You could say that some of the new generative AI companies would have really incredible data sets. I don't know if you would necessarily want to run an insights motion on like what is everyone typing into ChatGPT, but it would be interesting. I'd read that report.
Yeah,
I don't know if
totally.
it's super valuable to them.
What was do you have any favorite insight that you pulled out of Carta that blew your mind?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Some of them are not that fun, but they were mind blowing. I mean, so one of the biggest data sets we have at Carta is around employee equity. Obviously, we manage the equity for, I think, over 1 million private company employees now. So it's a very robust data set. One of the things that's very clear from the numbers is the vast majority of people will not only not see any dollars from that equity, they won't even exercise it. So about 70% of the equity that we see on Carta these days is actually not even exercised before it expires. And it expires usually at a 10-year mark, but it also the expiration clock starts sooner than that if you leave the company. So what this is effectively saying is startup employees who leave their companies, whether through layoff or by choice, only about 30% of them ever actually choose to buy the right to those shares and actually hold them in hopes that they're worth anything. 70% say no thanks. It's like they were granted no equity up front, which is pretty wild given the way that we talk about equity in startups. And there's a ton of like little nuanced equity questions that all of our insights have kind of surfaced that are better, hopefully better mental models for startup employees to make decisions about that sort of financial choice.
Yep. I think it was Sam Jacobs who talked about this. I think, did he say because people have 30 days to exercise them or something?
Yeah, 90. It's usually 90
days. Yeah. And
yeah,
then you
yeah,
need to
so
pay taxes on it before you
pay taxes on it as you exercise. It costs something. It's not free.
Yeah.
And then you have to make this weird, you have to do this like future projection, right? You have to say, okay, I'm giving up, I don't know, whatever you call it. I'm giving up $1,000 today. And it can be a lot higher than that.
Yeah.
For the promise that this might be worth much
Maybe.
more than that in the future, but how certain am I about it?
Yeah.
How much does $1,000 mean to me right now? You know, interest rates are high. Maybe I've got other financial things going on. Like all of that stuff is wrapped into this decision. So it's a tricky one.
Yeah. Now you have 137,000 followers on LinkedIn. Before we talk about any lessons there, like, do you remember very roughly your trajectory of kind of how long it took to get the first 1,000 followers and then to 10,000? Like,
so I came into Carta with I don't know, a couple thousand. I think I hadn't. Those
let's
were
say
just
5,000.
I mean, I hadn't even flipped on the, LinkedIn has the creator mode where you flip from just connections to followers and connections. I hadn't done that before I got to Carta. So there were no followers. It was just people I had met effectively. So yeah, probably like a couple thousand, 2,000 or 3,000 by the time I got into the company.
And that was April 2021.
Yes.
So like a little over 4 years ago.
Exactly. By the end of 2021, I probably had basically the same amount of followers that I started with. And that was because, again, I didn't expect to be like sort of the public face of this motion at the beginning. I was coming in to build an insights function, but the insights were going to be distributed by the company, and we were going to spend a ton of time on these big reports and all this kind of stuff. And we still do a ton of big quarterly reports, but in that interim period, we had just experimented a ton with distribution, and it's very obvious that the algos favor people just by definition. So it does need to come from someone, not some company. And then as soon as I started doing this pretty consistently, there was a trough where nothing happened. That was probably the end of 21 into the beginning of 22. And then it slowly started to tick up. And I think by the end of 22, it was like, I don't know, 40,000 or so, 40 or 50. And then it's been about 50 a year since then. So it took a while to get off the ground, but once it tipped pretty quick.
So in that time, what have you learned about the LinkedIn algorithm? Like what works, what doesn't work? What do you pay attention to? Anything that comes to mind?
I think the first thing to know is that it is always changing. I mean, every social algorithm is always changing. So you're not, people put out big reports about like all these things that are working. Like that stuff, one, is not super founded on data in my view. And two, it always moves. So there's never a perfect formula. I think one of the reasons or one of the ways in which, the graphic style helps. And I do think that text and image is still the best way to go viral on LinkedIn. There's other ways. Video is up and coming for sure, but a little trickier to understand what works and what doesn't on video. Plus, I don't think that LinkedIn has nailed the video UI yet. It like kind of writes the first sort of half of a line on the bottom of a video that's playing already. It's very messy. It doesn't actually give you a ton there, but I'm sure that video is going to be a bigger part of people's strategies in the future. So I like text and image. And then on the graphic side, it's so innately shareable to say, oh, instead of Peter posting a long text post where I don't have anything to hold on to, the graphic, the actual chart really helps. And I know for a fact, not only does that chart get reposted a lot, it gets downloaded and then reshared in WhatsApp groups, in text threads, etc. And I know that because people will send me screenshots of their text threads that have my stuff in them. And that's
I'm
awesome.
sharing
That's
my
what we
screen
want.
here so that people can, as they watch, also see some of
Yeah,
the
that's
graphs.
that's the stuff. So like that, and if we just pause on that chart, so like the chart layout is always the same ish, which is headline, subhead, data line. The data line is very important so that you're cutting off at the pass people who are like, well, how much data is in here? Read the chart. It's always in there. You can always tell for yourself whether or not it's enough. Big graphic. And then the bottom line, subscribe for more startup data, carta.com/data. You would be surprised about how many people you obviously can't click that link, but we'll type that into the search bar and come and subscribe. And that's our data desk. That's
Do you
a
have a
wonderful
guess? Like, do you have a rough, like, so
amount.
this
How many?
post has 480 likes.
Yeah.
Like, what's that? 30,000 impressions?
Um,
20,000?
much higher.
Much higher. Okay.
So this is a weird part about LinkedIn, which is impressions and reactions have become much less correlated than they used to be.
Yeah.
So I don't know why this happened, but it has been true over the last year or so. So yeah, that net performance TVPI chart has 85,000 right
Wow.
now.
So what's your estimate? How many people of the 85,000 ended up on the website? I mean, 0.1%?
Yeah. But it's a tiny percentage. But
Yeah.
again, if you do this every day, it doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
You're kind of always on. And of course, I actually think that you're talking about tips and tricks for LinkedIn. One of the best ones is one, do not put links in your posts. That stresses the reach. But now, you're seeing a link. Why did that happen? This post was taking off about after 90 minutes to 2 hours. I will come back and edit the post and put a link in there.
Interesting.
So after that time period, the link no longer restricts the reach. And then you can say, okay, I don't get those first people to have access to that link, but I get a second. And that link will take you to a report from which the data was drawn. And then guess what? If you keep scrolling, you can subscribe there, or boom, you can subscribe to the minute. Or if you keep scrolling down, oh, great, free report. So we gated the report halfway. There's a ton more information, etc. That is, our reports generate, I think that VC fund performance report is at 3,500 downloads at this point, and the vast majority of those come from the two sources are us email blasting it out and also LinkedIn. So I do think that the link strategy, if you're not going to do it, if you do it correctly, can be really helpful. Social platforms are incentivized to keep you on the platform, so they reduce the impact of links, but you can get around it a little bit on LinkedIn. The other two things that matter when you're talking about the algo. One, comments are the hack to get more prominent while your stuff is still not attracting a lot of reach. So first and foremost, if you are trying to create content on LinkedIn and you don't answer comments on your own posts, what are you doing? I see so many people who don't do this, and be available. Like, answer the comments quickly on your own posts. You have to do that.
Even if you only get two.
Especially if you only get two, right? Those are the most important two. And what you're doing there is you're building a relationship. So don't comment. If someone asks you a question on LinkedIn from something you posted, don't comment, thanks. Answer the question, or say, hey, that's actually a really great idea. I hadn't thought about it that way. Like, cool, interesting thing for another post, like coming soon. Like, be a real person. That's one. And the second way to use comments is have a list of people that you think produce really cool content, read their content consistently, and when you can, comment substantively on their posts. Do not comment great post. Do not comment with an AI chatbot that says, that basically just reformats what they said into a small paragraph. That is, I can tell you as someone who creates a lot of content, we know and we absolutely hate it when you do that. It ruins the flow. Like, the comment sections on my posts are actually really fantastic places where people are like mixing ideas, saying, yes, I agree, saying, no, I don't agree, or you didn't take this into account. That's the good stuff. do not rewrite that post with an AI and say, great, I did it. I'm blocking a ton of people who do that, and like you get no juice from me from that. But the reason that comments work are twofold. One, you can actually gain followers by thoughtfully commenting on bigger people's posts. So that's worthwhile for you to try. And the second is, if you comment consistently on someone's work, it is very likely that your own work will show up in their For You feed. And that's great. So if you wanted me, for instance, to read something that you wrote, you should comment on my posts for a week, and then it's likely that your stuff is going to show up in my feed.
Plus goodwill, right? I mean, you might remember their face at that point, and you might actually give them the benefit of the doubt and read what they had to say.
I will 100% do that. I cannot tell you how much more excited I am to get a DM from people that I know have been in the comments, and I do know because I read every single one of these myself. Like, it's great if you comment a couple times and then follow up in a DM, like, boom, I'm there. Let's have a conversation. But if you do that and then pitch slap, like,
yeah,
it's just it's so. And LinkedIn, I think, is actually very good about this. This is why I prefer LinkedIn to the other platforms. Is like X is about generating hype, and it can be useful for founders for sure. It's very difficult to break through. I think there's a lot of noise on X. LinkedIn, you get one shot a day. You only need to post once a day, no more. And you can just be like more of a real human being. And you're also talking to people who always have names and are not anonymous. So that it definitely keeps the like really frustrating stuff to a bit more of a minimum.
Yeah.
So I think if you're building a B2B company, like LinkedIn is a fantastic place to spend social time.
So what makes a good data insight? I mean, at this point with Carta, you could visualize a million things. So how do you decide what to visualize?
3 ways. One is, what am I personally most interested in right now? So like, again, this gets back to the curiosity point. If you're not interested, no one else is going to be interested. So you need to have some level of personal interest in the thing that you're building. For instance, I have a post coming out soon, which is all around lead investors. So this is a conversation that's been happening across venture lately, which is, are the lead investors, the people who write the biggest check into these rounds, are they dominating the landscape more than ever before because the smaller checks are sort of fading away? Well, that's an interesting conversation. That's data that we have, that we basically uniquely have, I think. Awesome. So I had that on my list to dig into for a while because I'd seen it pop up a couple places. So it's going to come out this morning, I think. That's a good example of the content. Some of the content that is best is not directly in response to any one thing. It's more like, what are people in my world talking about right now? And can my data add anything to that conversation? That's a wonderful way to build content. The 2 other ways, one, and this is the obvious one, which is, do you have a piece of data that contradicts established wisdom? Everybody says X, but actually Y is true. That's a time-tested post that'll work. The other one that people don't do as much, but I think can do more of, is, our data confirms established wisdom. So people don't often put this out because they're like, oh, well, everybody already knows that. It's actually very useful to be the source of truth for what everybody already knows. So if it's true that founders sell 20% of their company at seed, I can put that out a lot and say, hey, that's standard advice in venture, 20% at seed, 20% at Series A. That's still true. That is the market. And then you kind of, currently raising founders will read that and be assuaged that they're not doing anything stupid. And then you also get to say, but on the margins, or for this kind of company, it's not quite. So it's actually kind of useful to confirm things that people think they already know with data.
Because you're in such an active ecosystem, like, I wonder if there's a conversation happening on 20VC or on the All In podcast, and they discuss something, and it's kind of almost like what they call trend jacking or something, and you actually provide the data, the insight that would resolve this whole debate that they had.
Yeah, we call that newsjacking.
Yeah.
And we do it sometimes. It's candidly pretty hard to get right, because the flow of conversation moves so quickly. It's very hard to do off of a podcast. it's a little easier to do. Like, what's a good example? A consistent thing that comes up is on X every 6 months or so, there'll be a fight between people who think you should build startups in San Francisco and people who think you should build startups in Miami or wherever. And so that's a pretty easy graphic for me to spin up, that day that says, like, by the way, here's what people are raising in different places. Like, SF is still the king.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's simple. That's a good newsjack. But I actually prefer this way of newsjacking, which is not newsjacking at all, but it's a hidden benefit for insights, is you're a SaaS founder. You've got a little insights team. You also, of course, would love some press coverage. You should follow the top 10 reporters in your industry. Anytime they publish something that is around your world, you follow up with that reporter and you say, great piece, love to read it. Here's a piece of data from us that kind of supports your argument if you wanted to include it next time, or happy to be a research shop for you. Then you're a data source for press coverage. We get Carta data is cited in press 4 times a week by, every from the Journal to the Economist to wherever. That is a really valuable thing because these reporters get inundated with requests to cover their company. You're not asking them to cover your company. You're asking them to use you as a research. And that's a valuable place to be.
I mean, I want to point out one thing that's, I guess, obvious, but because you mentioned you need someone to do this who is a storyteller, but they're also can work with data and visualize it, and they're curious.
Yep.
From what you said, again, it's kind of obvious, but they also need to be embedded in that ecosystem. Let's say you sell to contract lawyers. It's not enough to have someone who is curious about data. Like, you also need to know what contract lawyers are currently talking about and what's happening in their world and like what debates are happening. You can't just look at your data set and be like, oh, I find this interesting.
Yes. You need to be in the flow of conversation within your industry. But if you're a good marketing team, you have to do that anyways. If you're not doing that, then you're messing up regardless. Like, and some industries don't live on X, right? Some industries live in the pages of the Wall Street Journal or on conferences. Some are much less showy, and they live at industry events or on certain podcasts. Like, you have to find where these people live and hang out and learn from.
Yeah.
Startups is easier because it's very obviously like X and LinkedIn and other places. Like, they're just kind of talking about, again, it's a very verbal place. But you have to be in the flow of conversation to do this. What you don't have to be is super well known beforehand. So, like, nobody in startups knew who I was before I joined Carta. I had done some other stuff. I had a network of actually non-startup folks, most of them. So it's not as though you have to walk in with a pre-built network. You just have to know what's going on in the world. So yeah, this insights person, they got to read the newsletters. They got to listen to the podcast. They got to, they need to be in the flow of things.
Now, I want to share my screen here one more time to look at some of your graphics, and let me zoom in a little bit. So you mentioned, I mean, you clearly found your format and you talked about it, the kind of headline, sub-headline, data point, then you have a big graph, you have this kind of call to action at the bottom. You use this every time. You talked about how you decide kind of what to visualize, what question to answer or story to tell with the data, but I'm sure you also found stuff about like how to actually visualize, because there's also many different ways that how you could visualize the same kind of data set.
Totally.
Can you speak to anything you found about like what's a good way to visualize data? And I mean, you have so many different ways that you visualize this, but is there anything to say here?
Yeah. There's a lot to say here, actually. Maybe, you know what? Could I share my screen?
Yes, I would love that.
Show you what's
yeah, you should be able to.
What's happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So where and how do I visualize data? I live in Tableau. There are other programs that are very good for visualizing data. I'd say the 3 ones that make the most sense for graphics, the way that you're trying to create them, are Tableau, Flourish, and Data Wrapper. There's also this thing called Raw Graph, which is more technical if you write SQL. You could do this in Excel and PowerPoint. Like you could, anywhere that you can create a chart, you can create a chart. The reason I love Tableau is one, I've been using it for a long time. And two, there are downsides with Tableau. I'm not saying it's a perfect data program, but what it is very good at is chart exploration, which is what you want. So as an example, this is so Tableau works in these like pill formats where you've got rows and columns for your data. They're drawn from a data set, et cetera, et cetera. So the advantage of Tableau is I can easily go ahead and change. Let's just like remove this. I can go ahead and change the like styling of this chart with a few clicks. Okay, now it's lines. But if I didn't want that, I could change it to bars very simply, and I can adjust the formatting. So as you get better at this program, like I have, I've been here for, I don't know, a dozen years. So it's, and I drag the series and okay, now it's seed, series A, series B, and they're just differentiated by color, et cetera. So this is why I like Tableau, because I can explore visually what the actual graphic looks like. And then once you find something that you like, here's the trick part. You build it in Tableau, you've got it the way you want it, it's perfectly formatted, et cetera. You then literally just copy the image and you
drop it into Figma. Yeah.
Into Figma. So boom, right in there. And as you can see, I have done this a lot. A lot.
Can we just go back 1 minute, because you said you jump around the kind of different visualizations, and you can have bars and lines and all of that, and I'm sure at this point you just have a ton of intuition. But if you had to somehow pull out, what is it you're looking for in the visualization for you to say, I like it, like this is well visualized?
I'm looking for, as you said, some of it, probably a decent portion of it, is intuition. But what I'm looking for, so let's like take a couple examples of a chart that I think is well visualized. So as an example, this is a chart that I did not put out because I don't think it's very well visualized yet. And the goal for me was to say, I want to compare how big a round was in the beginning of 2021 with how big a round is in the beginning of 2025. But this is it's not necessarily that there's too much information. It's that it doesn't immediately give me a takeaway that I want. So I would never put this out because I couldn't get the table in the right format. Something about it struck me as too messy, too dense, it lacks understanding up front. Whereas something like this, which is equally dense, there's a ton of data in here. This to me is easy enough and structured in a way where I think that if I get the right viewer of this data, they will spend a little bit of time to understand what's going on in the chart. So it's a little easier to go from red to green, right? So like green is good in everyone's mind, red is bad in everyone's mind, which is what I wanted. And then the cohort analysis sort of flows over time towards the later, more mature seed rounds. This is a chart that doesn't probably make sense to you if you're not in startups, but that's okay, because if you are in startups, it's probably arresting enough that you're going to come and see it. So that's one. You can make complex things as long as they like deserve to be investigated. Or you could do something literally as simple as bars. I mean, people kind of hate on just regular old bar charts. They can be awesome.
Yeah.
Here's an example of one that's really good. This is a chart on who's getting hired in startups. The black bars are months where new hires outweighed departures. The orange bars are where more people left than were hired.
Wow. Yeah.
So like this is just a bar chart. It's very simple. It has positive values and negative values, and then how you aggregate it. So I did a little call out here with an arrow. I added the titles of the legends very close to it. I have subsegments by year, etc. This is all just kind of stuff that you start to get a handle of as you spend more time in charts. I guess what I'm learning now is that you should be a chart nerd. That definitely helps. If you care about like well visualized things, the point that I always make to people who are trying to do visuals is, one, you should tell one story. If you're trying to build a chart to say 3 things, you should build 3 charts. And the second is, imagine that you had to give this content, as you will, to people who never get to talk to you. So everything that you want them to know has to be contained in the graphic itself. So don't be afraid of using text and actually saying things that you want to say. Like if you were giving this as a presentation, what would you say? Then literally write that into the graphic itself so people don't miss it. Like use words alongside your visuals, and the visuals themselves will stand out a lot more.
So the two things that I take away from what you just said, and you can tell me if I got this wrong, is number one is you're trying to make a point, right? Like you're trying to, let's say, answer a question through data. You pull out data, and now what you're trying to do with the visualization is what's the simplest way to visualize this so that someone can get that takeaway, that insight as easily as possible. And that is whether it's a line or a graph. It's just like, can someone look at that and from that get to that insight, that story, that takeaway that I want to tell as easily and quickly as possible?
Exactly right. And then as you get more advanced, as you start to develop your own intuition about what is a good and bad visualization, you stop only doing the most clear form. So there are people in the chart world. There's this guy called Edward Tufte, basically wrote the book, quote unquote, on data visualization. And one of his points is you should always, always, always use the clearest chart. Like if this is story best told in bars, then you should use bars, and don't worry if the bars are boring. But we're building for social. So sometimes it's okay to use a slightly more complex thing that looks a little bit more interesting. Like there's ways that you can make these charts sort of pop a little bit. You can use color in different ways. You can use different formats. I mean, a lot of my stuff really just defaults to tables, lines, and bars for sure, but there's different ways to aggregate it up. And so, I think that probably some of my stuff, a true like chart snob would look at them and say, well, you could have done this more simply, but my goal was to get you to stop reading on the feed. And if I did that, then that was the right chart.
I wonder, and this is kind of how I just thought about it when you said that, it's like telling the high level story, but then also giving people the ability to double click, where let's say the high level story is fewer companies graduate from Series A to Series B in 2024 compared to 2020. Yep. But then like, if I'm a nerd, like I still want to like, okay, but what about Q1 2022 versus Q1 2023? And if you do just like a super high level thing, I can't go as granular as that. And with your graph, I can do both. I can just get that high level insight very easily. But then if I want to double click, there's enough granularity where I can still nerd out a little bit on my own kind of.
Yep. And if you're building good content, oftentimes the audience will ask you for that level of granularity that then you get to build a separate graphic for. So oftentimes I'll put out data that's like, here's what median valuations are for the US. And the consistent replies are, this is great, but what about my industry? Or what about instead of the whole US, what about the Midwest? Because I'm raising in Chicago. Like all that kind of stuff. And those are separate graphics that you can either attach as a carousel, or you can build separately for different days, or you can use, one of the things I've started doing lately is I will build 4 or 5 different static graphics, and then I will stitch them together as a GIF. So they're effectively like moving from one state to another and like highlighting different portions of the graphic. There's 1,000 things to do once you get more excited about building stuff, but I wouldn't start if you're doing this, without that much background in charts. Like just build some bars and lines. Like that's the majority of what you need, and then start putting it out. Like don't gate yourself. Put it out and see what people think.
Love it, Peter. Thank you so much for your time. We went from kind of how to build an insight function, who should build an insight function, all the way down to how to build a high-performing graphic for LinkedIn. If people want to, know more about you, we'll link up your LinkedIn, we'll link up Carta, we'll link up your data newsletter. And I also saw that you recently put up a video on LinkedIn where you kind of walk through your workflow on how to create a graphic in Tableau and Figma. So we'll also link that up if people want to go a little bit more nitty gritty even. But this was awesome. Thank you for your time, Peter.
Yeah, cheers, Finn. This was great.